Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Market Information Lab Valuation Bootcamp. This is the week one of a 9-week series on valuation. My name is Jacob Lieber. I am a senior at the University of Illinois and a fellow at the Market Information Lab. Without further ado, let's dive into Introduction to Excel, week one of the Valuation Bootcamp. As a brief overview of what we'll be doing today, first we'll be talking about the bootcamp and what is going into it. 2, an introduction to financial modeling. 3, Excel shortcuts and formulas. 4, the practice exercise and utilizing Excel shortcuts and an example. And 5, some key takeaways. The bootcamp overview. So as I said earlier, this is a 9-week bootcamp that talks about valuation. First, we'll be diving into Excel, a really important tool when actually doing financial modeling. Second, we'll be looking at the financial statements. Third, some financial topics. Fourth, relative valuation in comparable companies and precedent transaction. Week 5 and 6 will be discounted cash flow analysis. Week 7 and 8 will be leveraged buyout analysis. And week 9 will be valuation output and pitch. Hopefully by the end of this valuation bootcamp, you should have an Excel model that is fully linked from start to finish. That should lead to a educated view and understanding of discounted cash flow, leveraged buyout, comparable companies analysis, and then you'll have an output that is ready to be put into a pitch. Introduction to financial modeling. What is financial modeling? Financial modeling is essentially the act of quantifying your views of the company. So you may believe that a company is a worthwhile investment, but you don't understand how. A really important way, or a way that you could do this quite easily, is to do a financial model. Financial model essentially takes the outputs based off assumptions that you give it. So if you believe that a company is going to grow at a certain rate or is valued a certain way, you can build a financial model to then project and sensitize some of these assumptions to get a better understanding of what the company is worth. After building a financial model, you may actually think that the company is overvalued, or you may think it's significantly undervalued. Essentially what this is showing us is that financial models, they give us essentially an output, but it's not enough to make a decision. But it is a really important part in making your decision. If you don't have a quantifiable number on why a company is a good investment, for example, a company could be valued at $50 a share, but be worth $100 a share. Without a financial model, you may not understand or have a value in mind of what you think this company is worth, so you may not know when to sell the share of a company. Why do we care? Essentially what I talked about earlier, it should help potential investors make a more informed decision. If your model says it's worth $100 a share, but it's currently trading at $125 a share, however you think it's still a good buy, your financial model would show you to not buy that company, but maybe short the company until it's valued at $100 a share. Additionally, a financial model isn't always correct. We're trying to approximate the value of an asset. A lot of times you'll use multiple types of valuation to try to triangulate around a range of value, right? A lot of times a financial model won't just say it is valued at X. It'll say it is valued at a range from X to Z. Steps in financial modeling. 1, decide the purpose of your analysis. A really great example of this is a stock pitch versus a merger and acquisition model. An M&A model is more focused on total transaction value and multiples, whereas a stock pitch is usually sensitized around share price data. So as you can see, there's 2 very different outputs whenever you're building this model. So whenever you're building the model, you should think more qualitatively about what you want your output to be before you start anything. Second, you want to do some research about your target and its industry. For example, how well is your company doing against the industry? Is it an industry leader, or is it maybe undervalued in an industry? Third, key drivers to value. Figure out what about your company is tracked by value, right? So if there is a certain metric that you're trying to follow, certain growth rates, certain things that make an impact, try to track these. Try to figure out how you can value or model these out. Fourth, you're going to build your analysis and then present your conclusions. So as you can see, a lot of information goes in more on the heavy assumption side here. 3 steps worth of thinking about assumptions, thinking about the purpose, thinking before you even start your analysis. Step 4 out of 5 is the actual analysis, right? One of the steps is actually building the analysis. A lot of people think doing the Excel work is fancy and very exciting, and it may be. However, there's still a lot of work that goes in before you even touch Excel. Finally, present your conclusions, which will be week 9. We'll talk about how you can present your conclusions in a way that makes sense and hopefully provide value to your investors or who you're presenting this to. Some financial modeling best practices. These are things that you should always look to do whenever you're doing financial modeling. These tend to be the industry standards. However, if you're working at a certain company, maybe you should adhere more to their standards. This is just what we've recommended for anybody casually or building out a module in our class. For example, color coding. As you may know, you can change the color of numbers in Excel. And you probably wondered why you did that. Maybe you've changed the colors for fun or to make it maybe stand out. But additionally, in financial modeling, you're supposed to follow this color coding format. Blue is a hard-coded number. So if you wanted to put 1 in a cell, for example, 1, and then you had another cell that was 1, and then you took the sum of these, 2, 1 and 1 would be blue because these are hard-coded numbers. And then 2 would be black because it's a formula. The formula is 1 plus 1 equals 2. Green is referencing a different sheet. So if I had 1, and then I wanted to reference another sheet that has 1, and then I added them together to be 2, blue would be the first one. So the first one is on my sheet. It's a hard-coded number, 1. The second one would be green because it referenced another sheet, 1. And then still 2 is a black formula. Red can often mean a number of things. It could be an important number or adjustment or inconsistency in formulas, right? So red is more of a pay attention to me color code. Now, why do you care about these color codings? Why do you care about any of these formatting fundamentals? Is whenever somebody opens up your Excel, they can easily understand what you've done or what process you've followed to get to these numbers. For example, if I sent my financial model to somebody who is higher than me, maybe my boss, they will easily open up the financial model. And if they wanted to make any changes or sensitivities around some of my assumptions, they could simply just change the numbers in blue. Instead, if they're all black numbers, they'd have to go through each and every cell to figure out where I have my assumptions and how I was calculating this number. Or, for example, I could be referencing from something from a different sheet, and they'd may be curious on how I calculated that number that I referenced from another sheet. If it's in green, it will clearly show them it's from another sheet, so they can look at other sheets to figure out how I calculated that number. Numbering. As far as numbers go, there's some consistency format that we would like to follow throughout the period. Dollar values, right? If you have a dollar value, a lot of times you'll see this with no decimal place, especially when you're dealing with millions of dollars, and no back-to-back dollar signs. For example, if you have a dollar, $2 numbers that are underneath each other, you'd only want $1 sign. You don't want all of the dollar signs going down the row. This can look sloppy and make your model look a little bit unorganized. Multiples. Oftentimes, you'll see multiples in a presentation regarding financial models. We only want to see one decimal place here. However, if you work somewhere, you should follow their formatting standards. Percentages, one decimal place, usually italicized. Percentages usually are very important and show us something that we may be interested in. So this is why we italicize it, that way it catches our eye. Negative number. Accounting style. We like to use accounting style when we're talking about negatives, making them in parentheses instead of having a negative sign and a dollar sign. For example, if it's in parentheses, it looks much more clean than a negative. And sometimes it's easy to overlook a negative number when you're looking through it. However, the parentheses is often harder to overlook. So other important things. One, you often want to, whenever possible, do the calculation in the sheet. That being said, if you want to add two numbers together, you should pull them in one at a time. So like I was talking about earlier, if you wanted to do on a couple different sheets, 1 plus 1 equals 2, if 1 and 1 were on page 1, and then on page 2, you're trying to get the summation of those two, you would pull 1 and 1 in before adding them on page 2, instead of on page 2 just typing 1, referencing 1 and 1. This should make sense as we get further and further into the financial modeling process. It's important to note that you don't want to do multiple calculations when referencing another sheet. Using dollar signs on the first line and then on your sum lines. Essentially, what you want to do is to clean up your values here and not have multiple dollar signs. Borders to indicate summation. So this is very common to see in accounting, but your borders will show either summation or some sort of process has occurred. So it could be a multiplication, etc. Borders are often used not only to separate your data, but to also show a certain type of action. And debt subordinated lines, for example, margins. This again is just a formatting thing to make your data look more clean. And then comments are used to talk about assumptions or sources or reference data. So oftentimes you'll see lots of different comments, which is the red corner in Excel, to show that there is a comment there. Now the comment could reference a whole number of things. Maybe it could be how they calculated that number, what their assumptions were, etc., where they got this assumption. This is really helpful for someone who's come along to look at your financial model and trying to understand what you did and what process you followed. Other common rules. Perform the calculation with no page. Do not put hard codes into formulas. For example, if I wanted to do 1 and then in my summation line, I would not reference 1 and then plus 1. You'd always want to put your hard codes onto the actual Excel. That way you're able to change those formulas and make it dynamic. You'll hear us talk about being dynamic throughout the whole entire Valuation Bootcamp, but always want to make it dynamic whenever possible. And you'll see what this is like in a moment. Use references to make models as dynamic as possible, right? So you always want to reference your assumptions via in a formula. You don't want to use the hard codes because if you need to change one number in a Excel model, you may not know what is being calculated based off that number. But if you're referencing the number, for example, if I was doing my common example of 1 plus 1, if I wanted to see what 2 plus 1 is, all I would have to do is change it from 1 to 2. Instead of having it in a formula, I would have to go into the formula, change 2 plus 1, and then I would have to go and see where all of that is impacted and have to change all of those formulas. Instead, I could make it dynamic and make a whole entire model based off 2 cells that have 1 in it. Save early and often. And this is very common to see if you're working at any sort of firm, but you want to V up or save up, version up, whatever you want to call it. For example, we'll be doing a DCF and valuation analysis around Chipotle. So you probably want to save each week's analysis as a different version. That way, if you make a mistake, you can go back to the original version. Or if you're looking through the DCF and you want to save up, it will allow people to see how much has changed from version to version. Another thing is if you go and save up, it allows you the ability to have a backup if version 2 becomes corrupted. Excel shortcuts and formulas. So as you can see, here is a screenshot of Excel. Now, if you don't know, the navigation on Excel is pretty intuitive. There's a way that you can use just the keyboard to navigate 100% in Excel. Using the Alt key, it allows you to toggle between each of the different ribbons to toggle between home, insert, page layout, formulas, etc. As you can see, if you press Alt on Excel, you should pull up an additional screen to practice. If you click Alt, you see a number of different options come up in this gray text. If you hit F, that will go to File. If you hit H, it goes to Home. If you hit N, it goes to Insert, etc. You can then click into and toggle through as many of lots of different versions of this. I highly recommend throughout the Valuation Bootcamp to not use your mouse as much as possible. Using your keyboard to navigate through Excel is very, very important and can save you a lot of time once you become very good at this. Some navigation. If you control and arrow keys, it takes you to the next spot. So this is called jumping in Excel. So if you wanted to jump to the next filled out cell, all you would have to do is press Control and arrow key. If you want to highlight cells, you should press Shift and then arrow key the direction you want to highlight. For example, if you wanted to highlight a whole entire row, you'd Shift and then arrow key. Switching tabs, Control and then the page up and page down button. Switching windows, Alt tab is a very quick Windows shortcut to switch between windows. Some commonly used shortcuts. You often see insert row and delete row, which are provided there. Group columns, ungroup columns, find reference cell, and locking references. I highly recommend you spend a little bit of time practicing each of these and seeing what each of them do. Copying and pasting is very simple, Control C. And then there's what allows us to paste special, Alt ES. This will bring up a certain pop-up that allows you to either paste values, formulas, formats, etc. This can be really helpful when you're trying to copy one part of the cell but not all of it. Next, you'll do paste right and paste down. This is very common whenever you're trying to fill a formula to the right or down, and you'll see this probably in today's example. Some general overall shortcuts is F2 is to go into the formula. So if you're hovering over a cell and you want to edit it, instead of double clicking in it with your mouse or clicking on the hotbar at the top, you can press F2 and then toggle between and format the cell that way. Zoom in and out is Alt WQ, and this will bring up a table that allows you to format. Remove grid lines, Alt WVG. Insert comments, Shift F2, and accessing the formatting options, Control 1. So we'll do a lot of this in the next assignment and the Excel exercise later. Some time savers. So Alt plus the equals key, so Alt equals at the same time, sums the cells above. Additionally, as you type in a formula equals to start the formula and you start to type a formula, you'll see the pop-up bar. As you can see in the bottom left, it highlights the most recently used formula. So average. For example, if you wanted to equals average, all you would type is A, and then you see average is highlighted. You would then press tab, and then it inserts average and allows you to just go ahead and fill in the formula. Other types of common formulas. So you have your statistical formulas such as average, the mean of the data set, median, which finds the middle number, quartiles, first quartile, third quartile. Additionally, you have the choose function. The choose function allows you to pick between different possibilities. For example, equals choose, and then you would have your case, if you're looking in the middle one, so equals choose, and then the first value is your number, right? So if you see this 1 here, you provide equals choose, you'll choose whatever is in this number, right? And then it lists all the values you want, right? So this says 1. So then the first value provided after the index number will be the number it pulls. So choose 1 would pull this number, choose 2 would pull this number, and choose 3 would pull this number. So this allows us to toggle between the base case, management projections, and the downside case. A corkscrew. A corkscrew is another common linking pattern that we see throughout financial modeling, and you'll see it a lot when we're building out different schedules. Essentially, what it allows us to do is take the ending balance equal the beginning balance. This is very common, you'll see in accounting. Basically, the end of the period is the beginning of the period, right? So the ending period of 2018 is equal to the beginning period of 2019. As you can see, it allows you to link multiple years and have this corkscrew pattern. The Excel practice exercise. So feel free to pull up the Excel exercise that should have been sent to you, or it should be linked below. And we're going to go ahead and start that right now. This is the Excel exercise. As you can see, it's an income statement. If this is the first time you're looking at an income statement, don't worry. We'll go ahead and fill this out together. However, I really encourage you guys not to use your mouse at all throughout this period and try to learn the new keyboard shortcuts that you have been implementing. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to try to make this exercise look like the answer key. The answer key, you may be wondering, exactly, that's on the next page. Press Control page down to toggle to the answer key. As you can see, this is correctly formatted based on all the things we just talked about. For example, all the dollar signs, everything that represents a dollar has no decimals, whereas margin or percentage is 1 decimal. Additionally, we have borders to indicate summation, and then we also have borders to separate the metrics and drivers. Finally, we have blue hard codes as well as black for formulas. So essentially what we want to do is we want to go through this exercise and make it look just like that. The first thing I'm going to do is make all of my hard codes blue. So follow along with me, using the arrow keys to toggle between each of the cells. Shift, right arrow key twice to highlight these 3 numbers. Alt to bring up my toggle menu, H for home. As you can see, font color is FC. FC, and that brings up my font colors available. The blue that I'm trying to use is there at the bottom, so I'm going to up arrow key twice and left arrow key to the one to the left to get my blue hardcode. When I have my blue hardcode selected, I'm going to press enter. And there you go. We just made our first hardcodes blue. You're well on your way to making a great financial model. I'm going to arrow to the left and down one to highlight the growth. So now that I'm at growth, I'm going to shift right arrow key 5 times to highlight these growth percentages. Again, I want to make these blue. Alt H FC to pull up my font color. I'll do that again. Alt H FC, one there highlighted. Arrow up twice, one to the left, blue. I'm going to arrow down and to the left to get to my operating expenses. Shift right arrow key twice. I want to make these blue. Alt H FC. Up arrow key twice, one to the left. Now it's blue. Down arrow key and arrow key to the right to get to my margin. Shift right arrow key to highlight my margin. Again, Alt H FC. Arrow key up twice and once to the left to highlight blue. Arrowing to the left and down, I'm going to highlight all my non-operating expenses because these are all hard codes. Alt H FC to highlight color, up arrow key twice and to the left to highlight blue. My taxes, shift right arrow key, Alt H FC, up arrow key twice, blue. Coming down to corporate tax return, corporate tax rate, shift right arrow key, Alt H FC, up twice, blue. So feel free to pause the video if you don't have all of these numbers as blue. It's really important that just these numbers that we have on the page are blue because these are our hard codes. If you have all these numbers as blue, feel free to continue along. If you don't, feel free to pause the video and get all these numbers to be blue. Continuing on, we're going to actually project out our revenue using the growth rate provided. So I'm going to start a formula using equals. I'm going to arrow key to the left once. I'm going to use the multiplication, multiply it by parentheses, 1 plus my growth rate, close parentheses. And as you can see, it has grown revenue, right? If you don't 1 plus and you just multiply it by the growth rate, you'll just have 56. Now, because this formula is dynamic, linking to the cell before it and the cell underneath, we're able to copy and paste this formula down the row. So there's 2 ways we can do this. One, you can press Control C, Shift, right arrow key to highlight, Alt, E, S, and then as you can see, if I click F, it will move down the formula. Press Enter, and then Escape. I've gone ahead and applied this formula to the next 5 cells, which shows the growth. Next thing I'm going to do is calculate my growth rate for the first 2 years historically. Equals 650, so up arrow key, divided by up arrow key, left arrow key, subtracted 1. As you can see, the historical growth rate from 2014 to 2015 is 0.083. Again, because this formula is dynamic, I'm going to copy and paste this to the right. Now I'm going to use a new way to copy and paste to the right. Shift, right arrow key, Control and R at the same time. Control and R at the same time. This allowed me to control and drag my formula to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a moment here, allow you guys to get caught up. Hopefully that this is making sense and you're able to follow along at home. If you're still trying to finish, feel free to pause the video. If not, we're going to continue to go. Our operating expenses are provided to us but our operating income is missing. So our operating income is revenue less operating expenses. Revenue is and then do this, you're going to press equals, arrow up to revenue, subtract our operating expenses to get our operating income. Control C, Shift right arrow key, Alt ESF to provide across. Again, you could just Shift right arrow key and do Control R as well, whichever works best for you. Whenever you do Control R, please be aware that you'll drag the formatting as well. So Control C, Alt ESF tends to be a more clean way when you're just copying across the formulas. Additionally, we're going to calculate margin. A margin is a number over revenue. For example, if I want to calculate my operating income margin, I'm going to take operating income equals E14 divided by my revenue, 600. And because my formula is dynamic, I can Shift right arrow key, Control R, or Control C, Alt ESF to drag my margin across. Now that I have my margin, I'm going to continue down and calculate my income before taxes. My income before tax is my operating income less non-operating expenses, equals 60 less 7 to get 53. Control C, and I'm actually going to drag this formula all the way across, Alt ESF. Now I'm going to take my taxes less my income before taxes to get net income. So income before taxes less taxes to get net income. Control C, Alt ESF. And now we have walked 2014 to 2016 all the way from revenue to net income. Very simple through addition and subtraction, following along. I also want to calculate my margin. So again, a margin is a financial metric divided by revenue. So for net income margin, I'm going to take net income divided by revenue. Net income divided by revenue. Control C, and then I'm going to actually drag this all the way across, Alt ESF. Last thing I'm going to do here for 2014 and 2016 calculation-wise is I'm going to calculate the corporate tax return. Corporate tax rate, not return, excuse me, equals taxes divided by my income before tax. This gives me right around 36%. Alt ESF to copy and paste the formula across. We're going to continue to fill in the financial information and then clean up afterwards. As you can see, it's a very jumbled mess, and this is why it's important to have very nice formatting. As far as operating expenses go here, it is not given to us. Neither is operating income. So you may be wondering, how are we going to calculate these two rows? One of the things we can do is we can take a margin and multiply it by revenue to get that financial metric. So because we are given operating income margin, we can then back into our operating income by multiplying our margin times our revenue. We're going to do that here. Equals our margin times our revenue. And then I'm going to drag this across, Shift right arrow key, Control R. Now that we know our income and our revenue, we can back into operating expenses by taking our revenue less our operating income. Control C, Control R, right? To drag my formula down the line. As you can see, we're able to use the margin to back into our number provided. Because we dragged the income before tax line across, we don't have to do any calculation here, and we can continue down to taxes. Now our taxes is going to be our income before tax multiplied by our tax rate. Income before tax multiplied by tax rate provided below. Control C, Alt ESF to copy the formulas across. Lastly, we're going to calculate net income. So our net income is our income before taxes less our taxes. Control C, Alt ESF, drag across. Now we have a fully working income statement that is 100% based off the numbers that we have provided in blue. However, it doesn't look very pretty, so we're going to go ahead and do some formatting. First thing we're going to do is start with the top line. Now this is a currency, dollars and millions, as you can see in the left-hand corner. So what I'm going to do is Shift, highlight the top row as provided. And then I'm going to hit Control and 1 at the same time. Control 1. As you can see, it brings up the Format Cells tab. Now, if you look at the Format Cells tab, the dotted box around the word number shows where your cursor is. So if I arrow left or right, it takes me from number to alignment to font, border, fill, protection. If I continue to arrow right, it will bring me back to number. We're more worried about number right now, but we may come back to font, border, or alignment later. I can simply press tab to toggle between the top and category. And then tab again will bring me into the category. And you can use tab to circulate all the way through, back to here. Shift tab will take you in reverse. So I'm going to tab down and arrow up to currency. Tab into it. Again, we want 0 decimals. We want the $ symbol, tab, but we do want this accounting format, right? We want our negative numbers in parentheses. Once I have this selected, I'm going to press enter. Hopefully you're able to get something that looks like this. If not, I recommend rewinding the video and watching again more slowly and try to pay a little bit more attention on the different steps. If it looks like this, we're going to go ahead and continue. If not, feel free to pause, rewind the video, figure out maybe what you messed up on. Again, this is a growth number. It should be presented as a percentage. So I'm going to shift right arrow key, and then I'm going to simply use a keyboard shortcut to make this into a percentage. Alt-H-P. Alt-H-P makes this into a percentage. Alt-H-O, or 0, sorry, Alt-H-0, will bring in 1 decimal place, which is what is required of us using the mill standard format. And as you can see, it's starting to look a whole lot better than what we had before. Next, we're going to format our operating expenses. All the decimals off to the right make it look very unclean. We're going to clean this up. Shift, right arrow key to highlight all of these. Control 1 again to bring up our formatting cells. Tab to drop down to category. Down arrow key to number this time, not currency. As you can remember, we don't want lots of $ unless it is the top line or the summation. Because you haven't done anything to operating expenses, you've simply just calculated it or been given it, there's no need for a $ here. We're going to tab again, 0 decimal places, tab again, space bar to toggle the use separator, comma, tab again to arrow down to the negative accounting, right? We want it to be in parentheses. Now we're going to press enter. Hopefully you should get something that looks like this. If you don't have something that looks like this, feel free to pause the video, rewind, or redo the steps before. If you have something like this, good job. We're going to continue. Now you can see we have operating income. This is usually a summation line whenever you're looking at it for accounting purposes. Because it is usually a summation line, I'm going to head and drop in a border at the top. One way I can do this is Alt-H-B to bring up my border and P for top. Alt-H-B-P. As you can see, I was able to drop in a line to indicate summation of revenue and operating expenses to equal operating income. I'm going to shift right arrow key to highlight all this, and I'm going to make this into currency because this is a summation. That is the other time you would use the $. Control 1 to bring up my format cells. Tab, down arrow key twice to get to currency. Tab again, 0 for my decimal places. I'm simply just going to type in 0. Tab to symbol. I want the $. Tab, down arrow twice to get my accounting formula, which has the negative numbers in parentheses. Then I'm going to press enter or OK. As you can see, I've now pulled all of my operating income dollars. Now has a $, and it's aligned, which is very important, to the 727 number. Margin is a percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and shift highlight again, Alt-H-P to bring up into percentage, Alt-H-0 to add 1 decimal place. As you can see, it's starting to look much more clean and look a lot more like an income statement. I'm going to give you guys a moment here. Feel free to pause the video and get caught up. If you're confused or maybe lost, feel free to rewind the video and follow me more closely. You guys will become much more comfortable with making these changes the more you practice in Excel. If your screen looks like this, we're going to continue to keep going. Non-operating expenses. As you can see, this is already formatted. There's no decimals. It feels like you don't need to move anything around. However, if you look slightly above it, it's out of line, or not in line with the zeros that have been presented above it. As you can see, the 7 is slightly indented, and this can look sloppy and make it look like you weren't paying attention to formatting. So we're going to do a quick formatting thing, Shift highlight all of these, Control 1 to bring up my formatting cells, Tab. Because this is not a summation, we don't need to use a $sign. So we're just going to use number. Tab, 0, tab again. We're going to check this box to use commas as a separator. Although there's no need for this, we always want to be consistent with our formulas, and you never know if you need to come back and change this. Tab again to get my parentheses for accounting format, and then press enter. As you can see, the only thing that this did here was it shifted to the left and aligned it. Additionally, a note should be made here. If I come back and change this from 7 to 7.5, there is no changes that happen in this. There's a change that moves it up to 8. It wouldn't say 7.5 if I didn't make this change earlier. Next, we have a summation here. So I'm going to go back all the way to the left, and I'm going to drop in a border here to show the summation. Alt-HB, P for top. Additionally, I need to clean up the actual format of this by adding a $sign and bringing it in alignment with all the zeros and the 7. Shift, right arrow key to highlight, Control 1 to bring up my format cells, Tab, go down twice to currency, Tab, 0 for decimal places, symbol is the $sign. And then I'm going to go all the way down to the accounting formula to show negative numbers in parentheses. Pressing enter should not only shift my answers to the right, but it should also include a currency, the $sign. So hopefully your screen looks like this. If not, feel free to pause the video and take your time making these adjustments. Like I said, the faster you get at this is 100% based off practice. So if this is going a little slow for you and you have to pause the video a whole bunch, I highly recommend practicing this multiple times before you take the next class of the Market Information Lab Valuation Bootcamp. Next, we're going to do a couple more formatting for taxes. Taxes is not a summation, so we don't need a $sign. We're going to make a simple formatting change. Control 1, tab, down to number, tab again, 0, tab, spacebar, tab, down arrow key to get my accounting formula, have negative numbers in parentheses, and then press enter. Again, this shifts this slightly to the right, so all my numbers are in the same line, as well as it would stop the displaying of potential decimals. Net income is a summation, so I'm going to go all the way to the left and include a border. Alt-HB to apply this border, as well as I'm going to come back here, Shift highlight, Control 1 to bring up my number, Tab, down twice to currency. Since it is a summation, we need to have a $sign, 0 decimal places, tab down to get to my accounting format, and then enter. As you can see, it shifted to the right and then added a $sign, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. Last, we have our margin to calculate a percentage. Now I'm going to use another keyboard shortcut to show you guys how to quickly highlight a whole line like this and then quickly make it into a percentage. Instead of Shift right arrow key 7, 8 times, what you can do is hold Shift, Control, and arrow key once to the right, and it highlights all of this. It will highlight from point to point. As you can see, it didn't highlight the column that has nothing in it. It highlighted from a full column to the next full column. Now I'm going to Alt-HP to make this into a percentage, and Alt-H0 to add 1 decimal point. Last thing here is we want to separate our metrics and drivers. So I'm going to quickly Shift right arrow key, Control Shift right arrow key. As you can see, it jumps to the last cell that has something in it. Control Shift right arrow key one more time to jump all the way to the end. Alt-HB, P for top, and then Alt-HP for percentage, Alt-H 0 to bring in my decimal point. The last thing I need to do here is indent anything that is additional afterwards. So I want to indent growth, margin, and then margin again. To do this, Alt-H6. I'm going to do that again. Alt-H6. Alt-H6. Now I've indented all my percentages. I'm also going to indent operating income. Alt-H6. Alt-H6. Basically anything that's underneath a summation line, we're going to go ahead and indent. Another thing you could see here is people may potentially bold your income numbers. So you may want to bold operating income and net income. This tends to be more of a style choice based on what you want to do. Last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make all of my percentages italicized. Shift, Control, right arrow key twice to jump all the way to the end. Control I. Shift, jump to the end, Control I. Shift, jump to the end, Control I. Now, as you can see, the percentages really pop out because they're italicized. And there we go. We have a fully completed income statement that is utilizing all these best practices we've talked about today. Some key takeaways. Financial modeling is an art and definitely not a science. It's really important to A, use financial modeling to quantify your views, and B, do a lot of research ahead of time. That way you're able to quantify these views. Financial modeling analysis helps you make an informed decision. It doesn't make the decision for you. The last thing is you want to get accustomed to using and formatting certain models. Please refer back to this page multiple times whenever you're trying to build out some of these financial models. That way you follow this formatting, and the next person who opens up your financial model knows what to look for. Practice using Excel keyboard shortcuts. Hopefully you did that whole entire Excel keyboard or Excel practice exercise with me only using your keyboard. I highly recommend practicing this multiple times. For example, that exercise may have taken you 20-30 minutes if you did it on your own. However, after multiple practice, you may be able to get this down to under 10 minutes. With lots and lots of practice, you may be able to get this under 3 minutes. One of our fellows was able to do under 3 minutes, so keep practicing. The more practice you get on Excel keyboard using these shortcuts will save you a lot of time, not only in the Valuation Bootcamp, but will also save you time when you're actually working in Excel on your job. These are not skills that will go unnoticed. Thank you guys for coming to week 1 of the Market Information Valuation Bootcamp. Hope to see you guys next week, week 2, where we go over financial statements. Thank you guys for coming. Have a good rest of your day.